Hey, it's Phil. Welcome back to the podcast. I am here once again with Sky Jatani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Sky. And Christian Taylor.
Hey, Phil.
Hi, who has new glasses and a very bright Coca-Cola sweatshirt. And
Ding.
There's a reason for that, which we'll get to shortly. But first, I have to sing a theme song. I think people have given up on suggesting characters because I just started ignoring them all.
That's true, you did.
Okay, so last week I'm picking them at random. Last week was Pa Grape. This week will be Sunday School Lady.
Hello, we're a podcast. What do you know? Hello, it's a podcast. And there is video. Hello, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky and Christian too. Say hi, Christian.
Hi, boys and girls.
And maybe a guest. Yes, we've got one here for you.
Woohoo!
Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
Good job. Okay.
Maybe I'll sing along with you next time.
Because you're our audience.
Hello, guest member.
Our guest is sitting over there.
Kind of feels like a talk show when we have somebody here to...
Well, and it felt odd, though, like I finished that magical performance, and we actually have
clapped.
it on, and there's just this, like...
But Bill doesn't count?
You know what I love about
because
Bill?
he's got to push buttons.
I love it when he giggles in the background. That,
Yes.
I know we're doing well when Bill is
Peter Boghossian heard
laughing.
him.
Oh, really? Did he?
He said, I like the laughing in the background. And it was,
That's awesome.
That was Bill.
Phil just keeps a laugh track with him wherever he goes. So you can feel like he has an
Should get one of those little boxes, in the bag.
what are
The
those
little
called?
laugh in the bag.
We have those.
The bag of laughs.
It's on his phone.
I don't
Oh,
have
that's
that.
right.
Do I have that?
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
might
you
be
do.
one of your things. Okay.
An app.
But that's okay. So last week, which has just come out as we're recording this, actually, I had the interview. Took like 3 months to set up the interview with Dr. Peter Boghossian of Portland State University. It was actually a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. You guys have had a chance to listen to it?
I loved it.
Good. You didn't make it till the end, though. Where
I didn't. I made it
arm
most. It
wrestled
was
for-
45 minutes. It's a long interview.
It is.
I made it 45 minutes,
and then you passed out.
I tell you, I almost got lost on the moose reference. In fact, I did get really lost, but I did keep listening.
We'll have Peter back on the show to further delve into the application of the moose.
He was wonderful. I tell you, I
he's a good
really
guy.
loved. I just loved how brilliant. He's just a brilliant mind, and he's so wonderful at engaging in conversations respectfully.
And he didn't make fun of me.
That is what I said to you today.
Yeah.
He accepted you. You're so brilliant too, but
thanks, Christian.
but you do it in a funny way. And so I think sometimes people don't take you seriously because of your sense of humor or your childlike way of talking. But I
don't know what you're talking about.
But he did not make fun of you 1 second, and I thought that was super respectful.
And I actually complimented him afterwards because I was thinking after I listened to it again, that must have taken some restraint.
Yeah,
to just not
because you were
ever-
laughing and being silly.
Yeah.
and he just let it be.
Well, he's a PhD in philosophy.
Yeah.
And you dropped out of Bible college to do puppets.
What's your point?
I'm just
I'm
saying.
not following you.
It took some
Sky.
condescending on his part to engage, and he did that very well.
Patronization?
Something like that.
Yeah. No.
I think you must have
well.
earned some level of respect for him in your own private conversations in order for him to even come on the podcast.
I'd like
I
to
guess.
think so. So we want to do it again sometime because it was a whole lot of fun. And it just went up, so people are just starting to listen to it. But Paul wrote and said, I really enjoyed the tone and civility of the discussion. Melissa has written in and said, what a great podcast this week. If only all conversations could be as informative, enlightening, and civil. Kyle wrote in, excellent podcast. It was great to hear both sides of the argument coming from folks who not only knew how to present their beliefs in a well-spoken manner, but who were also genuinely interested in listening to the other person.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Listening.
And you know what?
But it's hard to listen in media. You're just supposed to talk. Like no dead air, no, it's just talk. It's hard to do that.
Well, to have that deep of a discussion, I think you would seriously have to listen.
I was more, I told my wife I was more nervous than I thought I would be because you realize when it's one thing to hang out with, friends and just talk off the cuff. But if you're talking with someone that you are on core beliefs diametrically opposed to, you're really afraid of what you might say that could be preserved on YouTube forever and could come back to haunt you,
Right.
like when I'm running for Congress in 32 years
Not.
and they play that clip on CNN of the stupid thing I said off the cuff, and it's all over. So it was actually kind of strenuous.
Well, you know what I hope happens is
Yeah.
I feel like that was a template for a awesome way for Christians to engage our culture or
That would be
those
nice.
that believe differently.
And I do wonder how many people might listen to it on either side, either his fans or my fans, and say, well, you didn't accomplish anything. You know, you didn't get him to yield on any points. He didn't pin me to the wall like he could have. I didn't get him to the altar.
Right.
Like what did you accomplish? Nothing. And it's like that was the point, kind of.
It's an interesting contrast with the popularity of this movie right now, that God is not dead,
God's not dead.
which is about a
It's a
Christian college freshman going up against an atheistic philosophy professor.
yes.
And
Yeah. The villain in the film is
Yeah.
as close as you could get to
Peter Boghossian.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly. And I went to a state university and I took philosophy classes. I never had a belligerent, nasty, atheistic philosophy professor. I had philosophy professors who were atheists, but they didn't
Yeah.
make it. My experience was much more like what you had with Peter Boghossian, which is a thoughtful, challenging dialogue with somebody who is going to make me think really hard about what I believe.
Right.
But the popular perception that's being presented now to Christians out there is everyone in the secular academy is going to be unfairly negative and critical of anyone
Right.
who holds religious belief. And that's not really true.
Do we want that to be true? Is it part of our new narrative of the oppressed?
Well, I think there's a race in our culture to claim the title of victim. And the
Yeah.
more you can make your opponent look like a bully, the more you can look like a victim and then claim some status and position of power in that victimhood. So, yeah, I think it benefits us to paint the other side to be a caricature.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the other thing I thought was interesting for me was to listen to how you deal with your own faith. With reason, meaning if where he was asking you what would it take for you to question your faith or be moved away, and you
Right.
said, well, when I am presented with evidence that makes me think or that causes me pause, my confidence is eroded a little. And I've always felt that way, but then
You don't want to say it.
but I don't want to say it. Number one, like I think there was admitting that honestly.
What we really learn is that Phil is 51% Christian.
Yeah.
That's really what we
Unless I
discovered.
just read a book by an atheist, and then I'm 49%
Right.
until I can recover and
Right.
But
read
Christian, it's a
another
good
book.
point, because I think a lot of Christians will then deliberately avoid anything that could be critical
Right.
to their faith because they're worried about eroding it.
Right.
Whereas Phil, you're demonstrating, no, you go right into it and you engage.
Well, and you gave you also gave a roadmap for what you do when you're challenged like that. Your roadmap was when somebody presents me with a reasoned argument for why I shouldn't believe or think this way, I go and say, okay, let me read these things or let me talk to these people that know more than I do and let me compare those two.
Well, I
And-
think it's tough if you feel like you need to be the expert, especially if you bump into someone who is an expert. You know, if you bump into someone who has depth in their field, and maybe it's a very critical Bible scholar, and suddenly someone throws you a book at you from an expert that you don't have scholarship at that level. What I have come to understand is that the scholarship is out there. It's always
Right.
out there. Somebody's
done it.
Has read that book and has written a piece talking about it, critiquing it, pro and con, and it's in an online age. It's pretty easy to track that down.
Yeah.
So just don't be lazy. Go track it down. And first of all, don't be fearful that you're going to bump into something that would just end your belief. But you will bump into things that cause you significant doubt about your belief. So pursue the other side. Look for a balancing opinion, and then you can actually hold them both and decide if you think you can continue in your belief. And to date, I have been able to do that, which is why I can continue with my Christian podcast.
awesome.
Tomorrow, though, we'll see.
Tomorrow, who knows what tomorrow will bring? I don't know.
Well, and honestly, that you would say I am more than 50% certain of the things the Bible. I had never even stopped to think about how much do I believe the actual claims in there? Currently, I'm reading through the Bible, and I'm at the place where I'm in Luke, where Jesus goes and he casts out these demons and spirits, or where a woman, he said, was possessed with a spirit who was doubled over or whatever. And I sit there and I think through, do I really believe that? I never think through how much do I believe that? How many percentage? But it's okay. I mean, I guess I learned from that. It is okay for me to live in that place.
It's living with uncertainty.
Right.
And the further you go into the conservative Christian spectrum, down conservatism, the less comfortable people become with uncertainty. And it's trying to, even with kids, and I've done this in What's in the Bible, where I haven't seen this in a whole lot of other Christian kids products, where we'll raise an issue and then say, all right, what's the answer? We don't know. Who wrote Hebrews? We have no idea. No idea. What do we do with Genesis 1? Some people do this, some people do this. We don't know.
Right.
And some parents become very uncomfortable with that because you're making my kid think we haven't figured all this out. It's like, you're right. We haven't figured all this out.
And that's okay.
Not all of it is clear, and that's okay. And that's part of our VBS. If you do VBS at your church, the What's in the Bible VBS is now available.
Really used that, didn't
I
he?
forgot to bring the box. It's sitting out there. It looks like a giant cereal box. But anyway.
Your brain has like little monkeys in there. I think
monkey. I have monkey brain.
Henry Nouwen said that our inner life is a banana tree filled with monkeys.
Yes, that's me.
He really said that?
He said that.
That's awesome.
A banana tree
A
filled
banana
with
tree
monkeys.
filled with monkeys jumping up and down.
What do the
Yeah.
monkeys represent? Is this
Our
like
thoughts,
the moose thing?
emotions.
Peter's moose thing?
No, this
that
is
I didn't
that
quite
when
follow?
we get quiet and still.
Yeah. Oh, then the
and
monkeys
when we come
start
to terms
jumping?
with what's going on inside of us, it's a crazy, chaotic mess, and so we don't want to deal with it. We keep busy on the outside.
Oh, I am filled with monkeys.
You are.
That's
And I
good
came
to
up with
know,
that.
Theologically speaking. But anyway, the VBS is a
Is that a claim about evolution?
No, it's a dual track VBS because we descended from apes, not monkeys. Silly. Oh no! What did I say?
Wow.
I take it back. I don't know. I don't know.
That is the,
I don't know.
the YouTube video that is going to come back to haunt you one day.
I don't know. I don't know what we descended from. I don't know. Angels? I don't know. Okay.
Pretty sure I descended from my
Go
mother.
back to your pitching.
The VBS is a dual track VBS, which means you can do a version for parents and kids together where the whole family comes together and then they watch something and then they separate. And then I do video teaching just for the parents, 4 different sessions. And that's what we get into is like, what do we do with our lack of certainty about certain things? What do we do with genres of the Bible that are tricky to interpret? And because we can get parents comfortable with uncertainty, then they won't freak out if their kids bring back uncertain or tricky topics, and we can all be vaguely uncertain together. And in the family that can be uncertain together
Can stay together.
washes curtains together.
That's inspiring.
Thank you.
Uncertainty, that really draws a crowd.
If you want followers, tell them you don't know what you're talking about.
You could have the most mundane Twitter feed in the universe.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure about this. Just read this new article. Don't know what I think.
Is that why you wear gray all the time?
I just heard that they call this a grout fit.
A what?
What?
A grout fit. And apparently it's a really bad thing.
Who's they?
High schoolers can call this a grout fit because in high school you're really not supposed to wear gray, and so everybody looks down on you if you wear all gray. And so I was talking to a kid who had to do a project where he took a risk, and so he wore a grout fit so that
What is the root of grout besides the stuff you push in between tile?
I guess gray outfit is a grout fit.
Oh, gray outfit. I get it.
Yeah.
Gray outfit.
Anyway,
So there's
Well,
like-
that's all for today. Thanks.
Seriously, there's a bias against gray?
apparently in
In
the
high
high school
school?
where this kid goes, yeah.
Wow.
Geneva
Is
High
everything
School,
black and
or-
white, or is it all like color, bright
Like
color?
Pleasantville.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
colors. Or, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Anthony wanted us to review the new Muppet movie. I haven't seen it. I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
Anthony.
But
I saw it.
Sky Jitani went and saw it for theological
yay.
research.
Well, what did you think?
What did you determine?
It was not as entertaining as the last Muppet movie.
Okay. So the first new Muppet movie was better than the second new
Yes.
Muppet movie,
And-
just like the first Muppet movie was
And I
better
got
than the second
the
first
distinct
Muppet movie.
impression that Ricky Gervais, also an atheist,
Yeah.
really didn't want to be there.
Really?
Yeah, he kind of had this attitude throughout the whole movie that almost like he's looking around at these Muppets going, I can't believe I'm doing
How
this.
do you know that
had
wasn't
to have
just
been
his
a-
character?
Right. That had to have been a character.
How do you know?
I don't know. I just even when he had this singing and dancing number, and even there, he just kind of you almost roll his eyes, kind of. Am I really doing this?
That's
Yeah.
his character.
That's the vibe I got.
Okay.
That's his
Whereas like
character.
Tina
Well, he needed
Fey
the money.
and some of the
He needed
others,
the money.
they did it.
Everybody
No,
needs
it's his
the-
character. They would have
everybody needs the
fired him
money,
if he would. That was really his attitude.
I was
But
not
he's a
super
celebrity and he
impressed.
agreed to do the promotion. So
It didn't have the heart of the first one. If you
Okay.
saw the first
Okay.
one, there was some heart to it.
Yeah, there was some heart in
There
the
wasn't
first
much
one.
heart to this.
Well, it's because I think it was, hey, that worked. Let's make another one.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like
Quick. Let's make another one.
The root of number 2.
Speaking of
usually.
another one, are you going to see Rio 2?
I don't intend to.
Did you see Rio 1?
I did, but not in the theater.
Oh, okay. I saw it in the theater because I'm kind of an animation
And
guy. The first one, I haven't seen the
Oh.
second one.
Oh,
The
okay.
first one I thought was, okay. It was colorful. It was colorful as well animated, which is true of most big budget animated films, but they made another one. I'll probably go maybe see it. I don't know. God Isn't Dead. I haven't seen that. Have you seen that? God's Not
I have
Dead.
not
I've
seen
heard
it
a lot
either.
about it, though.
I feel like I'm supposed to see it because it's Christian, and I'm supposed to see movies that are Christian to encourage Hollywood to make more Christian movies.
I'm sure you'll get around to it.
But I'm kind of getting tired of that attitude.
What do you mean? The attitude that
The attitude that Christians should feel obligated to see movies made by Christians.
oh,
I
that's
think we
bad
should
news
just-
for Hollywood then.
Why don't we just see movies?
Don't
that
start
Are,
passing that around.
I want to see movies that I think are going to be good movies,
yeah, why don't
Period.
you see movies that are worth seeing?
which is why I also haven't seen Noah. You know, and everybody wants to know what I think of Noah.
You don't think that's going to be a good movie?
No, it never
okay.
really struck me.
I just came from lunch with a college student who wanted to talk about Noah, and I haven't seen the movie.
Okay.
And he saw it, so I asked him his impressions, and he loved it.
Yeah.
He said he had low expectations going in.
Yeah.
But he thought artistically it was really well done.
Okay.
And was actually impressed with it. But he thinks there's sort of a generational divide where older Christians are offended by the movie, and younger Christians like it. So
Did he know why?
Well, his argument was younger folks are looking at it artistically, saying, "What an intriguing film,
Right.
beautifully
Right.
made." That, and the older generation is thinking, if it isn't 100% absolutely right on target with the text, then it shouldn't be.
Well, I knew it wasn't
Valid.
going to be on target when the day it was announced because it's Darren Aronofsky, and I mean, he's an artist. He's not
Right.
He's not taking an assignment to do an accurate biblical film for the faith audience.
Well, because he's a Jewish atheist also, right?
Well, no. I think there are many Jewish atheists who will do whatever the studio wants them to do for $100 million.
Even if it's a movie about faith, increasing faith.
It depends on their mortgage.
Okay. Fair enough.
Because like Michael Bay came out of TV commercials. When you grew up, when you cut your teeth in TV commercials, you will tell whatever story the client wants you to tell.
That's what I do with voiceover.
Yeah, so there's a separation. There's
pay
a
me and I'll say it.
separation between what you believe personally and the craft.
Yeah, totally get
and
that.
so if Disney wants you to take Alice in Wonderland or the Country Bear Jamboree and turn it into a movie, you'll do that.
Yeah.
It's worth $10 million. So, if it's a strong religious statement like something that's proselytizing, then probably not, because you just wouldn't do it well. But for the most part, but Darren Aronofsky or the Coen brothers or Wes Anderson or P.T. Anderson, if it's or Woody Allen, they make the films they want to make and don't care as much about the audience and don't care as much about the money, which is why it's often hard for those guys to make money.
Yeah.
And so once you say it's Noah, it's a Bible story, it's one of those artists, or Terry Gilliam, one of those guys, okay, Christians aren't going to like this. Yeah, I know automatically because that's not the point of the film. The point of the film is not to please Christians by retelling a cherished story. The point of the film is for a specific artist to put a specific spin on source material.
Sure.
And that's exactly
so
what
going
happened.
back to your original point, you feel you're
I just-
chafing at the idea that Christians
just
have to go
don't-
to Christian
yeah,
movies to encourage Hollywood to
I just
make
think
more.
we should go to the movies that appeal to us, which this year for me has been one.
Which is?
The Grand Budapest Hotel.
I tried to get Amanda to go. She didn't want to see it.
Why? She
I'll go.
doesn't like Wes Anderson?
I think it looks interesting.
She doesn't?
Convince her. Send her an email.
Okay.
I will. I'll get her to.
Okay.
Come.
Okay, so
Hear that, Amanda? I'm going to start working on you.
I may go to see Noah just to see, but I don't like Darren Aronofsky. You know, I didn't see Black Swan. I know what it's about. It's not a pleasant story. I didn't see The Wrestler, but I
Are there any
know
black swans on the ark?
not a pleasant story. No,
I think it's just right above
Well,
the
there
water,
had to be because they exist in Australia. So
Swans float.
that's true.
You know, back
They
to your
float.
discussion about the gap between older Christians and younger Christians.
Yeah.
I have heard like two thoughts from my groups of friends, and one of them is, you know what? This is a well done movie. It is artistically creative and fun, to, good to watch. And my family came home and opened up their Bibles to see what was true and what wasn't and read the real story of Noah. And you know what? In my world, that's a win. That's a good thing. And then another person said, you know what? I don't want my kids to see this movie or anybody else, that is checking out Christianity because I don't want them believing a lie and thinking that I just read this story in the Bible. That, okay, if I see
Yeah,
these...
but I think we've all seen enough movies based on true stories or source material to know the movie never matches the book. I think we know that, right?
Some people don't.
The movie never matches the book because if you do that, you've made a
How
terrible
many
movie.
people, though, apart from regular churchgoers, how many people are going to go see Noah actually with an honest question about what the Bible teaches about that story?
It's about 6 people.
Yeah, they're going to all go because they want to see the movie.
Yeah, but there
Yeah,
is a
'cause
group of people, I
Russell
think, that
Crowe.
will go, whether they're Christians or not, see the movie and this story of Noah and think, now I know the story of Noah.
Well, when there's rock monsters helping to build the ark, I don't think they're going to say, yeah, I guess that's the story of Noah.
Okay, one of the objections I heard, and I love the fact that three of us are talking about a movie we've not seen.
Yeah.
I just think that
Isn't this great?
that captures.
We are
this
modeling the
podcast so well.
finest journalistic tradition of speaking about
What
which
we
you know
don't
nothing
know.
about.
This is hearsay reviews with the Phil Vischer podcast.
Let's review next year's movies after this.
Great idea.
The new Star Wars movie is fantastic.
Well, you already basically gave your review of the Unbreakable movie, which Angelina Jolie is making, even though you haven't seen any of it.
Well, I read the book.
Yeah. So a friend said that his objection, he saw Noah, was that its depiction of it makes God into a capricious brute
Yeah.
rather than.
So does the Old Testament.
Good point.
I wouldn't go that far. I think you
I'm
can
kidding.
An argument
I'm
could
kidding.
be made that he is a mean guy.
Well, there was apparently very little in the movie that would.
He's not really a personal God.
A
in the movie. He never
person leaving the
speaks.
theater is not going to walk away going, "Wow, that is an amazing God who redeemed a righteous family from a fallen world." It was more, "Wow, that's a pretty crazy God that did that."
Yeah. Okay.
So
And your
that
point?
that's not my point. It was his friend's point, saying he didn't like it because he felt. Forget all the liberties with the story. At the end of the day, it did not depict the God of the Bible in a positive
Would
light.
he have been happier if Jesus had showed up at the end to help unload the ark and carry the animals off on his shoulders
Probably.
and stroke their little heads?
Oh gosh,
would've just
the train
blessed
is
them.
really
He
off
would've
the
just
track
carried a
now.
lamb, right? That
Or
would've
if
been-
Aslan
What's
had
next
come
on
off
your
the
list,
ark at
Phil?
the end. Here comes
What's
Aslan.
on that list over there?
Next, we have a guest.
Well, no.
Oh, wait, you want to tell us why you're wearing a Coca-Cola sweatshirt. Oops.
If I wasn't here saying, Phil, I don't know that you.
He's
anyway,
a tough dog to keep on the
Yes,
plate.
he
God,
is.
we were having so much
Yes,
fun.
okay, so now.
Why are you wearing a Coca-Cola hoodie?
I'm so
Are
glad you
a
asked.
hoodlum?
I am not a hoodlum. I'm
That's
so
for
glad it's
Coca-Cola.
not outlawed for me to wear hoodies on the Phil Vischer podcast.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. I'm wearing this because I want to say thank you to Coca-Cola and announce
For all
what
the Diet Coke? Because I
Yes.
know I've appreciated it.
Yes, you have. You kind of keep them in business, I think. Actually, I know a lot of you know about the story of my son coming back at Christmas.
Yes.
Surprising us at the Blackhawks game.
From Afghanistan.
But what I haven't been able to talk about was that was just part of a bigger project. And the bigger project is a film that Coca-Cola was doing. And so for the last year, they've been working on this new film called Moments of Happiness, and they went all over the world filming happy moments and actually giving some happy moments to people. They gave one woman the opportunity to jump out of a plane over the Fiji Islands, so she got to be in Fiji for a whole week.
With a parachute?
With a parachute.
Okay, that's good.
Not
That's
Yeah.
kind of happy moment.
Oh, man, I've now decided it's on my bucket list.
You know, those are small islands to hit from a high altitude.
Yeah, that's true. That's quite true. They were small.
You just have to follow the pinging.
Yeah. Another woman got to hike in the Patagonia Mountains, and so that was a pretty amazing feat when she got to the top. Anyway, all of that to say, we were this American happy moment, kind of the culminating moment in the film. And so it's a new film to introduce the world of Coca-Cola, which is the museum in Atlanta.
Right.
And when you go there, you start by watching this film.
So
It's a
you're
7-minute
now
film
on the intro to the Coke Museum
for the
in
next
Atlanta.
5 years.
Wow.
So you have plenty of time to go and see it.
Wow. So
But-
we got 5 years. Let's plan our trip, Sky.
To Atlanta, huh?
To Atlanta.
Okay.
And actually, I have to give a shout out to Kristen Albee, one of our listeners.
I don't know who that
She sent me a little note saying, this was just a couple of days after the film premiered, we were just at the World of Coca-Cola and we saw you on the screen. And I thought, hey, I know her. And then realized, no, I don't. She's on the podcast. I just heard this story. So thanks for watching, Kristen.
That's
and
fantastic.
you guys go take a look at the film when you're in Atlanta.
So thanks to Coca-Cola for making a big star out of Christian.
And they gave us a wonderful, wonderful week of welcome baskets and limo rides and
Really?
just treated us like. And the museum is actually really interesting.
Yeah, I've been there.
Have you?
Yeah.
Why
but
did you go
weren't
there?
there because I was wandering around downtown Atlanta with nothing to do at a conference.
Yeah. Did you like the
look.
tasting room?
I actually don't think I paid to go in. I think I just went in backwards into the store.
Oh.
If you walk in the exit, you're in
Yeah,
the store.
you're in the store.
Exit.
And
through
they
the
will
gift
let
shop.
you buy
Yeah,
things even
I
if you
entered
don't
through
go.
gift shop and then exited through gift shop and didn't do anything else.
It was
So,
pretty cool.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Coke.
thanks, Coke.
Thanks, Christian.
If you want to sponsor the Phil Vischer podcast, I'll wear this every week.
Yeah, she'll wear a big Coca-Cola sweatshirt for the rest of her life if you'll
And so will these guys.
sponsor us. And I'll start drinking
make no
Diet
promises.
Coke. Oh, wait. Okay. We got to pause, and we got a guest. Andy Crouch is back with us today. We'll be right back.
Bye, everybody.
We're back here with Andy Crouch, who, wow, you wore your Coca-Cola
Yes.
hoodie too.
Yes, which is
What a
Christian.
coincidence.
And what was your happy moment?
Oh. Have you been to the Coke Museum?
I have, though not in this new version that features
Okay.
her family. But
Andy Crouch is the...
this is really hot, so I think I'll take it off now if that's okay. But it was fun while it lasted.
Andy Crouch
joke's
is the, what are you? Executive
Executive
editor. Executive editor of Christianity Today magazine right here in lovely Wheaton, Illinois. And he's been on the show before. He's a friend of the show. We are here to talk about the cover story of this month's issue of Christianity Today, which is N.T. Wright, the title, Finding Mr. Right. He's brilliant, prolific, and controversial, and says we've missed the heart of the gospel. Those seems like fighting words to somebody or other. So we're talking about N.T. Wright. Why is this news? What did he do something? Did he have trouble with the law? Did he tweet something
Do we need to
controversial?
kind of tell our audience who he is?
Yeah, we should say who he is, right?
Okay, who is N.T. Wright? Who is N.T. Wright, Andy Crouch?
So N.T. Wright, Tom, to his friends,
Yeah. Are
and
you a friend of
neighbors and
his?
acquaintances. Well, he's had dinner at my house, so does that count?
That's pretty cool.
I'll slip in a Tom from time to time,
Okay,
just
okay.
to sound familiar.
Yeah, on the inside.
Probably I think a lot of people would say the greatest living scholar of the Bible. And he
Okay.
did do something pretty amazing this year. He published a 1,600-page book in 2 volumes on the Apostle Paul. that is the longest book that has ever been written about Paul.
And was that what he was trying to accomplish?
Clearly needs an editor.
Was
That's
that
what he was aiming for.
Was there
Yeah.
someone from the Guinness Book of World Records there as he was
Yes.
typing to verify?
So his life work is complete to get the longest book.
Yes.
And what's
did it.
remarkable, unlike so many other Christian authors, he actually wrote it all himself.
No ghostwriters.
No ghostwriters.
Exactly.
But
So
did he
team
have
of
his
minions.
friends buy enough copies to get it on the
On
New
the
York
bestseller
Times
list.
I don't think it's on the
bestseller
bestsellers list.
It will probably not be a bestseller.
Yeah.
Except in very rarefied circles.
How many Bible scholars are there kind of at that top level in the evangelical world? Is it like five?
Well, the evangelical world. Ooh, I would say in some ways, it's a very small number. Because what Tom Wright is
Less
unique.
than one?
There are many evangelical biblical scholars who are doing really good work that engages their evangelical peers. There are a much smaller number who have had the level of influence Tom has had across all ideologies, believers, non-believers, conservative, liberal. I mean,
He's
there are a
respected
few others,
throughout
but
academia,
this is-
even with those who totally disagree with his point of view.
Right.
But his scholarship is second to
Can
none.
you name any others? Who else would be in that list?
who are working today.
Yeah.
I should have a
Are
list.
there
from them.
any?
There's no one like Tom.
There's no
That's
one
for sure.
like Tom. That's the hit song from Act 2 of our Tom Wright musical. There's no one like Tom. Okay. So there really isn't anyone like that. So he's fairly unique.
No one at the same level. I mean, and then there are a few other New Testament scholars who are not of evangelical convictions who are probably just as influential. They're kind
Like?
of duking it up. Jerome Murphy O'Connor, the Catholic scholar.
Okay.
Gosh, you're putting me on the spot here, Phil. Who else would I think of?
Yeah.
It's like George W. Bush
Well,
being asked the
John
names of
John
world
Dominic
leaders.
John Dominic Crossan. Yeah, it is like that. John Dominic Crossan, another Catholic, more liberal Catholic.
Okay.
I mean, so these would be people who have done kind of major work on the New Testament from different points of view.
Okay.
But the only one who can kind of go toe to toe with any of them right now, especially from a more evangelical perspective, would be Tom Wright.
Tom Wright. Why is he so popular?
Well, that's such a great question.
I would.
Yeah.
Well, I remember first reading Wright when I was a seminary student, and it was a very large academic book, a lot of Greek.
What was it?
Jesus and the Victory of God, I think was the first book I'd read. But I think what's made him so popular is he has a unique ability, not unlike C.S. Lewis, to write scholarly works, but then also write popular material as well. So he's written a number of books that are much more accessible for the average reader, the average Christian. I think that has propelled his popularity quite a bit.
Was there one book that made him put him on the stage, or is it just the total body over time?
His canon.
Yeah, what's put him on the stage is a series of books that are all part of a series called Christian Origins and the Question of God.
Okay.
It started with a book called The New Testament and the People of God. Then he wrote this book, Jesus and the Victory of God. That was about Jesus specifically.
That's like
Then
900 pages about Jesus, right?
Yeah, it's close. 400 to 500 pages probably.
Oh.
Then a very significant book, The Resurrection of the Son of God.
900 pages? Is that one 900 pages? Isn't one of them 900 pages? 'Cause-
Paul.
And Paul
1600.
makes up, the Paul book is as long as all the rest put together, I think.
Oh.
But this is all part of a life work, which is to say, when we go back and we look at the New Testament as historians, what do we learn about the ultimate question that every human being has? Is there a God? If there is a
Yeah.
God, what kind of God is it? And what's made Tom Wright so remarkable is he's both, in one sense, very conservative, in the sense that he believes that the New Testament actually gives us reliable information to base our conclusions about God on.
Right.
And he's, in other ways, very radical. That is to say, he reads the New Testament in ways that, in many ways, no one else has. To some extent, his own teacher, James Dunn, and others did. But he's taken the biblical material, while he fully believes they're deeply trustworthy and give us real hope in a real God, he also takes it in directions that the church has not usually gone with the New Testament.
Which has made him somewhat controversial.
Which has made him controversial.
And there's some sort of a back and forth with him and John Piper some sort of a what's that all about?
Especially controversial on the subject, the topic of justification.
Yeah.
This question of
I tried to teach that in What's in the Bible, and I'm hoping I got it right now. That I'm
Well, if you went against John Piper, you're likely to get a real boost in sales when he finds out.
and he tweets goodbye to me. Yeah,
So that's the upside.
you can hope for a critical tweet.
Right.
It's a big win.
Okay, the topic
in
of
publicity.
justification, which is kind of important, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's particularly Paul's understanding of justification.
Okay.
That Tom Wright reads somewhat differently than has traditionally been taught, at least post-Reformation.
Describe.
Well, Martin Luther comes along. Martin Luther is very anxious about his own salvation, feels like he's been taught by the church that you kind of earn your way into the grace of God.
Right, sacraments and such.
Overturns that, rereads Romans following Augustine, and many other people who have reread Romans at kind of turning points in church history, and says this is actually about how a sinner gets put right with God. An individual sinner gets put right with God, and that's justification. Tom Wright goes back, reads that same text, Romans, along with all of Paul's other work and the New Testament as a whole, and says, actually, that's a secondary concern for Paul. Paul is actually not that interested in the fate of the individual soul. Paul's real concern...
Paul doesn't care about me.
Paul doesn't care about you as much as you learned from your Protestant teachers.
Okay.
And Tom
does Paul care
says,
about?
The old way of reading Romans all led up to Romans 8. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ. And we often read that as there's no condemnation for me.
Yeah, it's a good place to stop.
Yes, but then there's strange thing happens. Paul does not stop there. He goes on to Romans 9 and spends 3 chapters on a topic that most Protestants find completely...
Israel.
Nearly irrelevant.
But that's just because the church in Rome apparently asked a specific question about Israel, and so he finished what he wanted to say, and then he had to address their specific question.
If that's true,
the mailbag.
It's like an appendix.
Why? If that's true, why
it's the Israel appendix, and it needs to be removed.
the vestigial organ?
I think it's Paul's epistle mailbag. Where it goes and answers questions.
Yeah, it's like you guys do, right? Oh, yeah, listener so-and-so wants us to comment.
Just in.
Israel, okay, 3 chapters.
So Wright
Tom
would
Wright
say
has made the case.
This is not the case.
That in fact, the climax of Romans is this question of what has happened to God's promises to Israel.
Okay.
Because actually, the real question that occupies Paul is God faithful to his promise to his people? And it's about the people of God rather than individual souls before God. That's the biggest... his first book in this series, right, was called The New Testament and the People of God.
Right.
Let me give you another example of what he does. It's not from Paul.
Okay.
The parable of the prodigal son, right? Oh, that's about our human tendency, each of us to turn away, run away from God, and how God is looking for each of us to come back, right?
Little lost sheep
exactly,
that we are.
Exactly. And we read
What's wrong with that?
So N.T. Wright in Jesus and the Victory of God says this parable is not about that at all. Any Israelite hearer, anyone hearing Jesus tell that parable, would think not of themselves, but of the nation of Israel, the Son of God, nation of Israel that had gone off the rails.
But it's not a whole nation that runs away. It's just one guy.
It's a parable. It's a parable for a nation.
A guy who then has a party.
So see, this individualistic reading, right, is so deep in our Christian heritage, honestly. And in some ways it's so fruitful. And by the way, Tom Wright would not at all want to say that parable has nothing to say about my own relationship with God. Am I the younger brother, the older brother, whatever? He would just say that's a tiny part of what it was actually originally about, which is the people and what God is doing through a people.
I think what Wright helps us realize is that a lot of the Christianity we've inherited came out of the cultural context of the Middle Ages and the doctrines and, in some cases, heresies of the Catholic Church at the time that people like Martin Luther and John Calvin and others were reacting against. So they took the questions of their day and brought them to the New Testament text and extracted answers based on those questions. So the question in that day is, what gets me into heaven? And the Catholic Church was saying you have to do these sacraments, you have to do these works. And Martin Luther brought that question in the New Testament and said, no, it's justification by faith alone in what Jesus did on the cross. And what Tom Wright is saying is that's all well and good, and there may be truths there, but to actually understand what the New Testament is saying, you got to not read it as a 21st century American or a 15th or 16th century European. You have to read it as a first century Jew.
But I'm not.
And a first century Jew is going to read the parable of the prodigal son this way and understand Romans and all this stuff about Israel this way. And that's been somewhat challenging because for the last 500 years, we have built most of Protestant
learned to read
Christianity
this other way.
on the questions of the Middle Ages.
So
rather than
would
the early
this
church.
be comparable, say, to John Walton saying we have to read Genesis 1
Like an ancient Near Eastern.
ancient Near Easterner?
Very much.
And this is very much the effect that reading Tom Wright had on me when I first started reading him when he was writing these early books. It's very disorienting because I'm not a first century Jew.
Right.
I'm a
Right.
21st century individualistic Westerner. I want to know what the good news is for me. Of course, that's exactly the situation that Gentile converts were in, right? In the first century. And this is the amazing thing that Tom Wright sort of opens up, that this is the problem Paul had to solve, that here are all these people coming into the Jewish Christian community and being told they needed to inhabit this story, this whole story of God's people that they weren't originally part of. They've been grafted in, right? So when we feel disoriented with these kinds of readings of the New Testament, we're actually in the same position those Gentile converts were in, trying to find themselves in this story that seems to be about this patriarch named Abraham who we never met and aren't related to.
Right. So what is the criticism of that? What are the critics saying? What do the John Pipers say? And do they make a good point?
Well, I think they do. They do have a point. In our article, Jason Biassy, the author, points out, for example, Jesus talks about a Pharisee and a tax collector praying in the temple, two individuals, and the tax collector beats his breast and says, "God be merciful to me as a sinner." And Jesus says he went down to his house justified. That doesn't seem to be an Israel story. That's about two individuals and different paths to or away from God.
Right.
And I think you can say, I think it would be fair to say, even some of Tom Wright's real fans, like me, full disclosure, feel like sometimes in his insistence on this broader story, he's not always maybe done justice to the smaller story that is there.
Okay.
And then his real opponents, John Piper, many in the Southern Baptist world, Al Mohler and others in the Southern Baptist community, they just say, look, this gospel of liberating, justifying grace is incredibly good news. And we don't want to replace it with just a sort of this other narrative of Israel.
Is it a question of either or both and? Is it one of those?
It doesn't have to be either or, I don't think.
Okay.
It could be different layers within it's a whole series of stories.
Theological layer cake?
I think one of the metaphors
Or an onion.
that Tom Wright used
I
is...
like cake better than onions.
Yeah, that was, the onion is not quite right.
Correct me if I'm getting the metaphor wrong, but at one point he talked about how
Turducken.
the gospel is like a car. Have you heard the gospel is like a car, and it has many different components and parts to it.
Yeah.
But there are some people who want to say, no, the gospel is
Is
just
the steering wheel.
Just the steering wheel.
Right,
That's
right.
it. And the steering wheel is justification by faith alone. And that's it. And Tom Wright would say, well, yeah, the steering wheel is there, and it's true, and it's right, but it's not the whole story.
And it's
a whole
even
other part.
it determines kind of the trajectory. Like it's not a vestigial part.
Right.
He's not all saying it's the
Do the
CD player
do the critics
or something.
accuse him of minimizing the steering wheel or discarding the steering wheel, or do they really just want to stick with just the steering wheel?
No, there's a fear that if when we read, give you another very concrete example.
Okay, good. Does it involve a moose? Okay, go ahead.
God made him to be sin who knew no sin, that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds like, wow, that's
all about me.
atonement language, that's justification language, that's transference of righteousness. And Tom reads that and says, actually, this isn't about ordinary Christians at all. It's about the first apostles, that the apostles are bearing this message of God himself bearing sin, and they are disclosing the covenant faithfulness of God in God's story. In other words, that passage that seems to be about justification is actually about the apostolic ministry. Now, if that sounds confusing, it's because no one has ever read it that way.
Yeah.
And so other people say, well, can it be that 2,000
Right.
years
Did
of
we
Christians
really
got it wrong
for
all this
2,000
time?
years?
Part of there's that hermeneutic that says the simplest interpretation is usually the right one.
Right.
And there are people on all sides that I think can be guilty of very convoluted interpretations. But
Right.
there are other things which I think are very strong about Wright, where he takes passages for me that had been convoluted in the past and actually has a very simple explanation for them.
Okay.
So one of the things people get hung up on is Paul talks a lot about we are justified by faith, not by works. And he talks about specific works like circumcision and various the Jewish dietary laws, things like that. Some people take you're not justified by works to mean there's nothing you need to do. There's no no obligation to fulfill any commandments of God. You're just justified by faith. And what Wright does, he comes along and says, well, that's not exactly what Paul's talking about. What he's saying is what used to make you a Jew was that you did certain things. You were circumcised and you had a certain diet and you practiced certain laws. And he's saying what makes you a Jew or part of God's covenant people now are no longer those ceremonial works, but it's faith in the Jewish Messiah. It's faith in Jesus that makes you part of God's covenant people.
Okay.
And it's being part of his covenant people that saves
So
you.
you're not justified, you're Jewified, and if you're Jewified, then you're justified?
Well, I don't want to get into all that, but I think a little bit. That's what he's saying. But it begins to make sense. It makes sense then why Paul would come down so hard on things like circumcision, but at the same time he's telling you to beat your body into submission and
Right.
strive toward Christ, and so Paul doesn't have this attitude of obedience doesn't matter. He has this attitude of obedience does matter. What he's saying is these old markers of Jewish identity are not what matter.
Okay.
So in that sense, you're not justified by the works of the law.
Yeah.
You're justified by your faith in Christ. But the works of the law for him is not just general obedience.
Yeah.
It's these specific commandments that mark you as a Jew.
Okay.
Am I saying that correctly, Andy?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
It's so hard for us, 500 years into the Reformation, to imagine our way back into a world where the biggest questions are not about me, but about us.
Right.
I think that's really, what you can nitpick a lot of Tom Wright's specific points, but the brilliant insight is, what if we've missed out on what really is clearly there in the Bible, which is it's about a community from Genesis 12. I will make you a great nation. What happens to that promise? Jason, in his article, has this great observation. He says, I've never heard a gospel presentation, like a summary of the gospel, that mentioned Israel.
Right.
But Israel was God's...
They had their chance.
That's
Exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly. So could
came
it
in
be
second.
that actually the gospel all along was about a people? And once you start asking that question of both the Old Testament and the New Testament, a bunch of things come together in actually a simpler way than the answer that says, well,
So,
Israel
okay.
they messed it up and they're written off.
Here's my ultimate question. Say you were someone who produces children's teaching materials.
Yes, say.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically,
You have a friend.
You were someone and you were trying to teach the Bible to children broadly through a lot of denominations.
Yeah.
Is it best to steer clear of some of the newer ideas of a Tom Wright? Especially after my Southern Baptist friends have listened to this podcast and know we've had this conversation, for example.
Well, the main thing I would say is I actually think this makes teaching the most compelling parts of the Bible much more relevant, because the Old Testament is full of stuff you want to teach to kids.
Yeah.
But the question is always, what exactly
with
do
it?
these stories have to do
Right.
with, the story of faith in Christ?
Right.
Well, if those stories are all about how God is acting through his people the whole time to save the whole world, to be a
Yeah.
blessing to all the nations, and how the people of God at every stage either have to choose faith in their maker and redeemer or turn away, then suddenly all those stories matter, rather than being kind of strange, either just funny tales or moralistic object lessons that don't relate to the gospel. So I think as long as you are telling the biblical stories, you're going to be fine.
So you think that someone who teaches children, and this could go, we've got Sunday school teachers that listen, we've got all sorts of people that listen. You think there's value in reading right and reading correctly, reading right, and applying it to most any denominational context. I mean, if you're the Sunday school teacher at Piper's Church, you really need to steer clear. Is it how broadly is this being embraced.
I think you could take a few steps back from some of Wright's specific ideas and go more to this general truth, which I think everyone would affirm, and that is, as 21st century Americans, we tend to over-individualize our faith. And what Wright helps us remember is that from beginning to end, the Bible is a story of God redeeming a people who then participate with him in the redemption of all things.
Okay.
So we do have a tendency to make it just about me and God, even with the way we talk to children about faith.
Right.
And helping us to remember that it's not just about me and God, it's about us and God. That there is a connection between our corporate identity and our connection to God.
Well, isn't this even some of the tension in baptism of do you baptize a child
absolutely.
into the people of
That's
God,
right.
or do
Yes.
you wait until they've
Right.
gone to
they
camp
can make their own decision.
and then
That's right.
decided if they want to follow
Well,
Jesus?
and on the flip side, I wouldn't want to lose the evangelical heritage either of the importance of individual commitment and conversion. And so I just had a conversation with my 11-year-old daughter who came home one night after a Bible study and said, what is it that makes us different from Roman Catholics? And are Catholics really Christian? And we had a great conversation about it. But one of the things I wanted her to see is, one of the good things of Roman Catholicism is the strong emphasis on the role of the corporate church, that you belong to the church. That's what your identity is. And that we have a tendency in evangelicalism to de-emphasize that and just talk about our individual salvation. And what the Roman Catholic tradition could probably learn from us is the importance of personal communion with God and not just the corporate. But they both need to be there. So I wouldn't want to lose either side
There's
of
a
it.
whole lot of both and.
Yeah, and I think Wright helps us remember the bigger story of the whole community of God that we
And
can emphasize.
I should say something else too that applies to your Sunday school teacher,
Yes.
which is I don't think we would have put him on the cover if he just were a scholar with these kind of crazy ideas about rethinking justification. As important as that might be, and it's an important conversation. The real reason to read him is that you emerge from reading Tom Wright with a much deeper confidence that this is true. I mean, like really true, like historically true, that it's reliable, that it's, I can base my life on it. Like if you're having a 49% day, like this could flip you to like even 52%.
Thanks, Tom Wright, for the extra 5.
At least
You
that's
got me
been
over the hump.
That has been my experience, especially his book, The Resurrection of the Son of God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing
Well,
how
I've
thorough it
heard
is.
Tim Keller did a Veritas talk out at UC Berkeley, to a bunch of really antagonistic, philosophy students and all sorts, and several of them just said, well, you can't believe any of this. And his only response about Jesus was, you need to read Tom Wright's new book. It's, I think he said 900 pages, but maybe he lied.
And Keller would be somebody who probably disagrees with
He
Wright
would
on
disagree
Paul.
on some of the nuances of
But he's
justification
still
for sure.
respected as a New Testament scholar. For
Okay,
sure.
cool. So, CT, subscribe, cover story, Tom Wright, read it.
Sorry.
Ding.
There it is.
Do you have a new book? Do you have a new book coming
No,
out?
it's only been like 2 months since I was here last.
Well, hurry up and write something.
Get your team on it.
I'm
Come on.
holding this up if you're listening, so just imagine this is the giant box that is the What's in the Bible VBS. Look, it's like the size of a family-size Rice Krispies. That's how much, but it's much heavier.
How much sheer value
Yes,
is
sheer
packed
value
in.
fortified with 10 essential theological truths and vitamins. And wait, Futureville, Sky Jitani, his new book, run out and get it.
And don't forget about my new website.
Oh, and Sky has a new website.
Yeah, skyjitani.com has been completely rebuilt. There's some bugs still, but
There's some bugs.
It's really good. Go check it out.
Okay, go check out skyjitani.com. And What's in the Bible number 13 is now out in stores and perfect for your post-Easter shopping. Since you're watching this
that a thing?
right after Easter.
You know,
Wow, I'm so full of eggs. Let's
really-
go to the mall, honey.
it's like the returns after Christmas. I mean, resurrection is
Yeah.
really another way of return.
We didn't use all this plastic grass. What could we exchange it for? That's what you say. Or this basket doesn't fit and it makes me look fat. I'm taking it back. Oh, Tom Wright, did he get it right? Or is he a little too adventurous in his theology? I think we can learn a lot from him. And he might teach about biology if he moves out of Bible school. It's probably not going to happen, but it would be kind of cool to see what he could do if he applied his prodigious brain to everything else that we're laboring with that makes us insane. And thanks for Andy Crouch for coming on the show to tell us about reading your magazine. We're going to go out and subscribe because we all want magazines to keep printing. Okay, see you next week.